it was very, very clear that education is our only savior. But you look at schools, there's one exam and we grade everyone on that. You look at industries, promotions never happen like that. I think every time a new student comes, they feel, what are we doing? Why don't we have teachers in our campuses? Why don't we have the schedule and everything? When students come to our campus, the first activity we ask them to do is to take a laptop which is not working and show us the RAM. For the first time in their life, they open a laptop, take out something. So that's our pedagogy. Most of the students, when they come for the first 2-3 weeks, that pretty much everyone is crying, and we take it as a good signal because that reflects that sort of losing their own, old skin and pushing them into the zone. Obviously, we do that with a lot of warmth and love.
I hope so.
Yeah. You graduate when you get a job.
How did you come to this epiphany that the education system has it all wrong? So talk to me about NavGurukul. You set this up. It's not a university. So what is it? It's an alternative university. What does that mean?
So NavGurukul. So when I was in working with Delhi government, and I was talking to a lot of people, especially people who have gone through higher education system, and I started asking them what worked for you when you were in college. Most of the people didn't name that their university premise or infrastructure was the key driving factor in their success. They mostly recognized their peers or their mentor figures, not necessarily the greatest of the professors, but professors who believed in them, who felt more personal mentors kind of figures in their life. So what I realized increasingly while doing those surveys was that the most important part of university is the people and less about the books, the curriculum, the infrastructure. Obviously, they do play a role. I'm not denying their importance. And when we started thinking of what our higher education system would look like, we started figuring out how do we make it a people-centric space where they feel supported, where they feel encouraged rather than being tested throughout the system. Our university system, I think, works on a low trust system where we are continuously telling people, hey, I will tell you what you learn. I'll tell you if you know this or not by testing you. And then I'll give you a grade that actually holds no real value in the industry. So we have completely shifted the onus and responsibility of the learning from the learner to the administration. And now this seems like a tug of war where administration is trying to prove their point and students are trying to prove their point. So we wanted to build a trust-based system where the students drive their learning, they support their learning. And one of the very simple examples is in university, you graduate after 4 years, no matter how sharp or how slow you are. At NavGurukul, you graduate when you achieve your skill set or when you get a job. So it may take you 2 years, it may take you 6 months, it does not really matter. What matters is you went through the entire curriculum, you got a job, and now you're a graduate. So changing this very definition put the onus of or the responsibility of learning from us to the student, because now the faster they learn, the faster they get a job and the faster they leave. We didn't have to tell them, hey, your semester is running, can you please learn faster, etc. For example, in our college, until 3 years, people will not study much, and in the 4th year, when placement season is going to come, everyone is cramming their notes, etc., just to make sure they get a good placement. It doesn't happen at NavGurukul. Every day, the pace of the job is on their hands, right? So a lot of these changes we brought in terms of education. And in fact, the name NavGurukul, it comes from two different words, Nav meaning new, and Gurukul, which used to be the old pedagogy in India of learning, which was actually destroyed when British came to India and they brought about the industrial way of education. The idea of a Gurukul was a very simple institution which would be run by students. Students will cook, they'll clean, they'll manage everything. The expenses will be low. The community will bear the expenses. The families won't have to be bothered about that. And when they finish their education, they'll probably give some Guru Dakshina or some something to the teacher as a mean of respect, which was not a decided sum of money. And they will graduate when they achieve a certain skill, when they basically reach somewhere, rather than saying, hey, you have finished 9 years and now you leave. So we adopted a lot of those principles and we integrated the old ways of Gurukul with the new ways of technology, and we came about with something which was extremely student-centered and yet produced results which were a lot better than colleges.
This notion of Gurukul, which breaking it down for our non-Indian audience, is based on guru.
Yes.
And your teacher, your sage that passes on this knowledge to you. But Gurukul is also rooted in the Indic civilization history, isn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the largest universities in the world, Nalanda University, which was destroyed later, was a very glaring example of a 10,000 students university which was run like a Gurukul.
In what century?
I think almost 8th century, roughly 5th to 10th century in between.
It's astonishing, and it was one of the biggest universities in the world, if not the premium university to go to. Many people don't know that outside of India. So you're breaking down this notion that a university has to be these 3 or 4 years where you go and you learn all sorts of subjects that may or may not be useful to you. But I want to push back a little bit on that, because while on one hand, I love the idea that you're kind of breaking the mold and you're doing this different style, the goal seems to be you come here, you get trained so that you can get a job. Aren't there other people that might say, well, hold on, university is also about learning many things. You're learning many subjects rather than just choosing one from the beginning. You can have, especially in a liberal arts education, not all universities, but you can have many subjects, and you can see what your interest and your skills match best. But also you're learning vital life skills. You're away from your family usually, or increasingly so. Even in India, you're out all the time. You don't have that sort of watch over you that you might have had, and you're growing up. If you truncate that, aren't you taking some of that vital life skill experience away?
So there was this very interesting quotation that I read somewhere, that if we start teaching how to walk in universities, people will forget that at one point of time we could learn how to walk ourselves. I think what happens when we start educating people and we take the responsibility of that, we start introducing subjects as, for example, music. Instead of, let's say, teaching how to play piano or encouraging them to do that, we essentially start teaching them, let's say, theoretical notes. If let's say we pursue music like we pursue physics today. I think at NavGurukul, for instance, we do all of that. It's just that instead of you doing that as a subject, it comes as a challenge. For instance, our students routinely do flash mobs, they do a lot of theatre, they do a lot of sports, etc. But it's not a mandatory subject that they have to pursue and get credits for. In fact, we have a lot of students going through discussions. One of the examples that I give is that from our students who have graduated, barely 5% of them have gotten married so far. And for these women who are coming from rural and tribal areas, who get married by the time they turn 18 or 19 immediately. And in fact, most of the students who dropped out from our courses, pretty much 95% of them are married today. But from the students who graduated from us, from our courses, only 5% of them have married. That itself showcases their social mobility. That itself showcases their understanding of being able to sort of take charge and decide for themselves. So if given a choice between them pursuing a course on feminism versus actually living it, we prefer the latter. I'll give you one very simple example. When students come to our campus, the first activity we ask them to do is to take a laptop which is not working and show us the RAM. We give them the screwdrivers. So instead of telling them what a RAM or a hard disk is, we just ask them to show it. So they use the screwdriver. For the first time in their life, they open a laptop, take out something. So that's our pedagogy. Our pedagogy does not truncate life skills. It actually live life skills on a daily basis. The campus is student run. There's a student council which manages the budget, which manages everything in the council, in the campus. And running a 150 students girl campus for the girls is not easy. Just to do that, maintaining discipline, maintaining safety, maintaining academic rigor and discipline, that itself is such a huge life skill.
That's true, and I want to talk a little bit about this, because your model of this alternative university is very much based on the fact that it is there is room and board included in this, right? And also I want to talk a little bit about the fee structure, but we'll come back to that. Why is it so important that the students all live in these residential areas? And we must actually pause for a minute and remember that a lot of these students are coming from far away. If not by miles, then they are coming socially far away. Their backgrounds might be completely different and very isolated from very homogeneous places, right?
Yes.
So was that part of the reason why you decided that they needed to come and be on campus? Give me a little bit more
Absolutely.
about it.
So there are few clear advantages of that. One, when you come to a campus, which is not just catering to the local population, and most of our campuses support students from all over the India, the first advantage is cultural immersion. You come out of your comfort zone in terms of language, in terms of the people that you tend to know from your village, etc. The second very important thing is that for some time, they get space to move away from their local family context and focus on education. Because otherwise what happens is, especially we do have students who are from local areas, and there's a lot of going back and forth with their families, and when they go back to their homes again, they start thinking about small other things, etc., because a lot of them come from troubled backgrounds. So this space also becomes a safe space for many people to actually just focus on their learning and not be buzzed about, let's say, hey, when are you getting married, when are you having kids, or whatever. The third advantage is that given this deep immersion, instead of, let's say, being able to do 6 hours or 8 hours a day of learning, we actually are able to do 15 or 18 hours of learning every day, because learning doesn't happen just when they're in classrooms or studying something. It also happens when they're doing activities with their colleagues, etc. So those kind of bonds, the relationship that they form, and it takes me where I started, right? I mean, a lot of learning is about the people that you're with, and this gives you this very intimate space with people, making friends that will stay for you with life. But at the same time, there's obviously a disadvantage that sometimes a lot of women in India do not find social acceptance to move to a faraway location, and especially because they don't have the means to book flights, etc. Obviously they take trains, and sometimes it takes them, let's say, 3 days to reach our campus, etc., from their households. So that does create a barrier, and a lot of students do drop out, and we are exploring models where we do open day boarding, day scholar kind of centers where the students can come, they learn. Obviously some of that intensity that we have in residential center will get reduced. For example, in our residential centers, the students come, they do things like flash mobs and other things. Making sure that those kind of things happen in the day scholar format, there's going to be sort of more resistance, because for example, in our campuses, for the day they're learning, in the night they're having all of these activities, and then they perform them, let's say, on Sunday. When you're having a day scholar structure, fitting it into all of this is going to be different. And if you look at it, most of the universities actually in the world, they have the focus on a residential sort of a structure. Very few top universities will have a day scholar structure actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you find any resistance when you were creating this? Were there people that told you this is not the way to go?
Absolutely. I mean, so the first resistance was when we started looking at a girls' center. People were extremely scared, and even from the donation perspective, they felt like there are millions of things that will go wrong, and it does. I mean, I'll not say it is a foolproof thing to do, because the kind of age we're working with, 17 to 22, there are relationships, and there are cases when sometimes the students will run away from the campus and other things happen because they're in a relationship, etc. So that was a big problem, and also it is expensive to run residential centers. We do not charge anything to the students, so all of that cost we have to raise from our donors, and it becomes a decently large cost. Even if the student run the campus, even then there are actual costs with regards to fooding, lodging, etc. So that was there. Even from our families, it was a lot of resistance. My parents were like, do you do anything, but please don't run women's centers. What if some girls file a case against you, an FIR against you, whatever, what will happen to us and all of that. So I mean, there's a lot of this emotional drama, and also this genuine practical considerations. And we have suffered, there were a lot of times when we had to file FIR, and we had to sort of go through a lot of legal processes to make sure that the students are protected. When we opened our first campus in Bangalore, it was in the outskirts of the Bangalore, so pretty much every second day or third day, one of our students will be mishandled by one of the community persons, touched inappropriately, etc. And being in a space like that, knowing that this is happening, was very hard, and there was a lot of inaction from the police, and that's where we started a lot of activities, including flash mobs, etc., to just claim our space in the community. And in fact, when someone would do some action like that, we made sure that the students call everyone and they make a big scene about it, so that these things don't go unnoticed. And but again, it took a lot of effort just to make sure that the space was safe for us to stay, and we had to do that over and over again, because whenever especially you have these girls' campuses, you have some group of boys who feel it's a good place for them to just hang out and keep ogling, etc., kind of things to begin with, and then things go bad. So I mean, that claiming of space, for example, when it was in itself took us a lot of time to establish and understand, and also to do it in a way such that we don't compromise safety, because the last thing we want is some person reacting out of anger and doing something which is actually harmful to the students.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not a school or a university exclusive to girls, is it?
It's mostly girls. 95% of our students across all our programs are women, essentially.
Okay, because I first found out about this because I went to Chhattisgarh, and I walked into a building that I thought was a BPO office.
Yeah.
It was one big room full of desks and computers, and I was like, wow, I'm in the middle of Chhattisgarh, and I wasn't expecting a BPO office. And they said, no, look, these are younger people, and they were marginally younger in my eyes, and they were students, I was told, and I was really surprised to see. It was a great atmosphere. It was full of camaraderie, and everybody seemed to be serious, but kind of also it wasn't a stressful atmosphere. It was a pleasant atmosphere. But there were girls and guys.
Absolutely. So Dantewada is one of the exceptions for us, because Dantewada is a Naxal affected area in the country, and there were a lot of education related challenges, because of which it was very, very hard to mobilize only girls batch. And it is an exception rather than norm for us. Pretty much all the centers except Dantewada and one small center in Himachal, these are all fully girls center.
Interesting. I suppose in a way that makes it easier?
I don't think having girls and boys had made it difficult for us, to be honest.
Okay.
But at the same time, yes, I think parents do feel more comfortable sending the girls.
I meant that way in terms of getting
Yes.
your students and the
Yes.
acceptability.
Yeah.
But now let's talk about the curriculum, because this was something that was seen as a male domain: computer programming, tech, AI. These are the courses and the subjects that you're offering to these marginalized young women.
So yeah, I mean, these are few of the courses, and in fact, we have started, for example, another batch of courses that we call School of Second Chances, wherein we're working with women who are coming from extremely vulnerable backgrounds, like they might be HIV positive, or they might be coming from a red light area, or they might be put in a shelter home because they were raped or sexually violated, and they don't have a space to go. And in that course example, we're working on a course on chef, elderly care, nanny care. In fact, one of the courses that we're looking at is civil design, civil construction. So one of the very interesting things that I found in India, for instance, is that when you go for construction, you have these laborers who picks up stuff and put it somewhere and other things, and then you have this mason who basically actually does the brickwork kind of things. And in India, you will not find female masons. And I have talked to so many people, so many architects, because we are building some of our own campus. We couldn't find even a single mason in a huge network who was a woman. And that's interesting, because being a labor is actually a lot more physically intensive, and it pays roughly half of what a mason gets paid, and yet you'll not have women. And there's no biological reason why that makes sense. I mean, it's just stupid that it doesn't happen. And the more you dig, it's very clear, because again, it's not about just software engineering being a man's world. It's a lot of, most of the careers you will see, even if women end up in some careers, the top of the ladder is basically sort of not meant for them. For example, women cook in most of the Indian households in India, yet if you go for any catering businesses, all the catering businesses are led by men, their top chefs are men. So when it comes to millions of cooks, it's women. When it comes to the top cooks or the chefs, it's all men. And it's not because men are better cooks, basically. It's just traditionally those jobs have been reserved for women.
Yeah.
Sorry, men. So I mean, while software engineering like things are glaring examples, because we see, hey, these are new careers, and given that there's no obvious advantage that men has, why don't we see women here? But also these traditional careers, you see men more, playing a more sort of a top kind of role. Other thing with our courses is that we want to make sure, especially with the students, that they learn these things while being challenged all the time. One of the biggest problems, especially with the women, especially in rural and the tribal households, is that they're taken easy on education. I mean, it's almost like, okay, you have to get married, so you don't have to be bothered about maths, you don't have to be bothered about science, etc. So at least when they come to our centers, they feel challenged, because they're not used to being challenged in education. And suddenly now you're being asked to build a website in second week of your education or third week of your education, and you don't know how to use a computer. And those kind of challenges for them, in fact, most of the students, when they come for the first 2-3 weeks, pretty much everyone is crying, and we take it as a good signal, because that reflects that sort of losing their own old skin, and they're doing something that makes them deeply uncomfortable. Obviously, we do that with a lot of warmth and love, but pushing them into the zone. In fact,
I hope so.
Yeah. In fact, there was this swimming pool, there was a sort of lake nearby in one of our Bangalore campuses. So one of the things was that almost all the men knows how to swim, especially in the rural areas, because they'll go and take bath in the local bodies, their bodies. And from the same village, women will not. They will not access those lakes. So when we started asking them, can you just go and try sort of, you take a life jacket, and we actually bought life jackets, and they'll wear a life jacket, take a big run, and then take a big jump in the lake. It's a big leap of faith for them, and breaking a big barrier. Now suddenly a girl who'd never even think of accessing the lake because it was meant to be a male-only area, now suddenly can sort of do all of that. So, and it goes back to what we were talking about, life skills, right? They're living life skills every single day.
Wow, that's a very cool story. One of the things that I think is also very interesting about NavGurukul is that you have this guarantee.
Yeah.
And there's a job at the end of it.
Yeah, I think this guarantee is more like I would say, gimmick. I'll tell you how, because we changed the course structure by saying you graduate when you get a job.
Aha.
Okay. So what our guarantee is not that, you'll get a job. Our guarantee is that we'll support you until you get a job. And that again goes back to, it's a very important thing, because we want them to sort of understand that you have to work hard towards a job, and we will make sure we support you until you get one. But ultimately it is your hard work, and whether you take 6 months or you take 2 years or you take 4 years, it's okay. We're there to support you, and that acknowledges that people learn at different speeds, and they graduate at different intervals.
It's quite revolutionary.
It's actually quite interesting because it should be the ordinary and the norm, and it seems revolutionary, right? It just seems very simple. I'll take the example of walking. You have kids, and every kid learns to walk at a different age. Some learn sooner, some learn later. It doesn't mean one person's walk is better than another. It doesn't mean if you started walking at 3 and I started walking at 2, my walking is going to be better than yours. But there's this constant pressure. You have to finish this in this interval. It's okay. Some people take more time. Maybe they take, what we realize is some people actually in our campuses, they learn very fast, but there are gaps in their learning. And there are some students who learn very slow, but they go through so thoroughly. They actually love thoroughness. Even between me and my wife, I am one of those people who's a very fast reader. And she's a very slow reader. But obviously, what I read in 5 minutes, I'll remember probably 30% of it. What she'll read in 5 minutes, she'll remember pretty much all of it. But we have this certain notion that this is better than other, and that's where the problems start happening. And that's where then we have to start defining, okay, you're in this grade, that grade, etc. It doesn't really matter actually.
How did you come to this conclusion? You're quite young. How did you come to this epiphany that the education system has it all wrong, and that it's not following basic human instincts and life trajectories that are innate to all of us, that somehow or another we've left behind?
So fortunately, I think in India, finding those traces, there are organizations which are sort of working on that. For example, in Ladakh, Sonam Wangchuk created SecMol, which is a very interesting example of how they essentially brought a lot of these principles into life. In fact, the student-run council, we essentially took it from them. So a lot of these travel, a lot of these meeting these people, and even being able to reflect on my own journey. And then, as I mentioned, we did a lot of surveys of the people around us to actually understand what worked for them. Another example that I will give, which is less rooted in Indian traditions, but let's say in industrial revolution itself. You look at schools, there's one exam and we grade everyone on that. You look at industries, promotions never happen like that. Salaries are not decided like that. You go through a 360-degree process. It's not just how much do you know, but how do you behave in an organization which decides your promotion. How well do you engage with your peers? How well do you engage with your juniors? How do you help them to grow is also part of your KRA. If you look at industries, the way they sort of give recognition to someone is a 360-degree feedback. Way we do this in the schools or the colleges, it's a very loose framework. We just say, hey, you ace this exam and you're good. So there's a very strong disconnect between our industries and our schools and colleges also. Even though these colleges are meant to serve these industries, the disconnect is very strong. And that's one of the reasons why you will see, for example, from most of the startups, the successful startups that came from IIT Delhi, they were not from the top scoring candidates. They were actually from the average scoring or low scoring candidates. Because how well do you make a startup will not depend on what grades did you get.
Yeah.
It also depends on how do you engage with people. Some of our people who actually were politically very active in our college, they actually have one of the most successful startups because they were able to mobilize people for something that they believed in.
Interesting.
And how do you measure that in an examination?
And those soft skills and those life skills and those communication skills, which is something, excuse me, which is something that AI is not going to be able to replicate. But we'll come to AI in a minute. But what you're saying is, you might not feel that it's radical, but I think that it sounds a little on the radical side. Have you had any pushback from people saying, this is just too much?
I think every time a new student comes, they feel it's, what are we doing? Why don't we have teachers in our campuses? Why don't we have, the schedule and everything? There's always this pushback, but I think within 2 to 3 weeks, they start understanding that how it is advantageous to them.
Tell me that again. You don't have teachers.
We don't have teachers.
You just have gurus.
I mean, there are no gurus also, they're facilitators. What happens in our campus is, it's a student-run campus. So for a younger student, an older student will be the mentor. For some of the older students, some of our existing alumni will be their mentors. And so these alumni we have hired as facilitators in the campus. They're not teachers by any chance. The students learn by themselves, they learn by peer activities, they learn through hackathons, and they're supported by their mentors who are past students, senior students, or they're supported by some alumni facilitators. And that's why actually most of our team members that we have on our payroll is actually our alumni. 70% of our team is our own alumni. And also just to put in the context, so residential programs is one of our programs. We have actually 8 or 9 such different initiatives that we're doing. And most of these initiatives, alumni have a very strong sort of hold and a lead in some of these initiatives. They're leading a big part of our organization.
Let me get this right. 70% of your staff come from your alum.
Yes.
But how did you do this the first year? Because you wouldn't have had any alums.
Yes.
So was it you and Rishabh teaching
and
sorry, not teaching, mentoring?
Yes.
How did you do that? And did you design a curriculum for which this is based?
Yes.
Or?
So a big part of this is, as I mentioned, a new element to this Gurukul, which is wherein our technology, our curriculum comes in. From the very beginning, we actually created our own platform. We started creating our own curriculum. We started putting it out there because the curriculum for software engineering was not meant for people who are not really good with maths. And most of the students we were getting, they were not comfortable with maths. In fact, a lot of them struggled with very basic multiplication kind of things also, and their English was also extremely poor. So a lot of that curriculum we had to create. So I mean, and now for example, when you look at mentorship, there are a lot of advantages to student-driven mentorship, but there are also challenges because sometimes the mentors themselves don't know the right thing. And when you start relying on a mentor, the mentor may guide you in a wrong direction. I still remember an incident, and our students, while they were managing the campus, their own studies, they also used to do 1 hour of community surveys. And one of our students who was most proficient in English at that point of time, he was taking a class of some of the students from the nearby slums. And then he started teaching them pronouns. And while he was teaching them pronouns, he got confused. He said, okay, let me teach you by an example. And then he says, house, this is my house because house is an expensive thing. Socks, it is my socks because socks is a cheap thing. So we use this for expensive things and it for cheap things. And that's where, one of the biggest perils of a mentor education system would be. If your mentor themselves are not well informed, and that's actually not true just for student mentors, that's also true for Indian teachers in a lot of government schools. Yeah. They don't know a lot of things they're teaching, and they teach them wrong, or they teach them sort of in a way which is incomplete for the student. And that's where for us at least AI has been a big boon, because we're now creating a lot of systems where at least for a lot of these expertise, we can ask them to sort of use an AI system to get those doubts clear. And we use a mentorship system to make sure that they are supported emotionally. There's a lot of, as I mentioned, like this environment that they are in. It is a positive and a conducive environment for them to learn in all possible ways. And AI takes up a lot of their technical learning aspects.
Okay, that's really interesting. I just want to unpack that a bit by going back a bit to, do you have subjects? I mean, there are obviously targets. The target is to get a job. I suppose if somebody's taught in one narrow stream, it doesn't matter if she doesn't know all of this other stuff as long as she knows that. Or do you try and say, excuse me, or do you try and say, no, we want to make sure that they know these 9 things before they pass out or before they get a job and go. Yeah. So do you have a structure like that? Can you just break it down for those who might be interested in how this is actually?
Right. So we have a program called Manthan, where the students actually go for excursions in different NGOs, etc., and they try to understand social realities, for instance. As I mentioned, a lot of this exposure that we build, we don't necessarily put it as a curriculum, but rather as a something that you actually experience and do. Likewise, a lot of our students actually practice Vipassana. They go for meditation courses. We obviously do a lot of sports and exercises in the campus. Physical and mental well-being we take extremely seriously. We have access to counselors as well as just listening sessions, not counselor, but listening sessions for the students to go through if they're not necessarily looking for help, but just to be able to speak out. Then at the same time, there's a time when they learn English, and the basic idea is that when you're learning English is just a language, it's just a way of communication. While you're learning English, you can actually learn a lot about the world. So in most of our English activities, they're basically life skills focused activities. They're focused on essentially building your own understanding. One of the examples of activities that we did was where we asked students, that activity happens regularly. The students are asked to pick up a rare medical disorder that they might have heard of somewhere. It might be sickle cell anemia, whatever, that they don't understand. Go to Google Scholar, download research papers, use AI to sort of understand them, and share the cutting edge research which is happening for that medical disorder and present it. Now, that's a very higher order problem to solve, right? I mean, one, they're obviously using AI, and I mean, using ChatGPT is not any rocket science anymore. But then actually being able to decode some of this extremely difficult medical language, it's very empowering. Because a lot of these people are coming from villages, and a lot of these doctors in these villages, they're not sufficiently enabled to understand most of these rare disorders. They might be able to treat things like, let's say, fever or malaria, but they don't know what sickle cell anemia is, or what SCA is, or what dementia is, for example. But they are now, let's say, able to do that. So a lot of our English learning activities go through a similar trajectory, where every activity they pick up extremely difficult topics, which actually sometimes even university people are not used to, and they go through them. Obviously, the level of implementation improves with time. One of the curriculum that we're building for schools, which is something that we do outside residential programs, is where we have built curriculum for students from 6th grade onwards. Every month, they pick up a new career. And in that career, they build something using AI and they deploy it. For instance, if let's say this month I chose to be a software engineer, I'll build a website using some AI tools like Lovable, etc. If next month I'm a lawyer, I'll actually prepare a case and I'll fight against an AI agent. If next month I'm a cabin crew, I'll actually learn things like CPR and first aid and handling emotional chaotic kind of situations. And so, the experience one career each every month.
How do they pick those careers?
So basically, we have about 80 careers that are listed. So they can choose any career because they just feel attracted by the virtue of an image that they saw, by the text. We have again a portal for all of that. And at the same time, there's a facilitator in the class who has trained. The teachers themselves are being trained for that. So the teachers themselves sometimes support them. Hey, these are some of the careers you can choose. And it's very interesting because a lot of these careers that exist today, they didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago.
Right.
Even, for example, look at nutritionist as a career. Yeah. Earlier, only sort of celebrities would have nutritionists. Now, even middle class people, especially because of growing obesity rates in India, unfortunately, they have nutritionists at their disposal. Someone they can call. So a lot of those jobs, they experience through this. For example, as a nutritionist, when they explore nutritionist as a career, they actually may just create some kind of meal plan for someone who's diabetic. Mm-hmm. So they build projects as a counselor. Let's say they learn active listening and they do 8, let's say, active listening sessions for their friends. So they're experiencing.
So is it wrong of me to say that NavGurukul is focused on tech? Do you have graduates?
Yeah.
Okay, and so do you have graduates who decide, computer programming is what I thought I was going to do when I came in, but actually I'm going to do something completely
different? Our residential courses, we have about 7 or 8 courses right now. Programming, which we started, which is one of our flagship courses, but then we have business, we have finance, we have chef course, then we are actually about to launch a textile course. We are also working on a civil design course, as I mentioned. We're working on an elderly care course. So we're working on multiple bouquets of courses, and we're working with a lot of entrepreneurs who are building these courses as part of NavGurukul, but with a lot of individual freedom and ownership. So that's our residential programs. Then we also have online programs. Then we also have a laptop refurbishing unit within NavGurukul, through which we have distributed about 15,000 laptops in 1 year. We take laptops from corporates, refurbish them, and we set up labs. We put in offline AI systems. We put in a lot of offline content tailored for that demographic. We are also creating curriculums for the governments. We have created official AI curriculum for ITS, where 27 lakh children study every year. We're now officially creating curriculum for Punjab government. We are also about to enter a big partnership with the state for 300 schools pilot on career exploration module that I mentioned. Then we also have a team of about 30 developers who are building AI tools all the time. So for example, another tool that we built is a real-time voice-based system. Because what happens right now is if you use ChatGPT kind of voice systems, the API costs about $5 to $10 an hour, which is prohibitive for Indian masses. I mean, we will not spend $5, especially a poor person can't even think of that. It's more than their daily income also. We have brought down that cost from $5 to $10 an hour to 10 cents an hour.
Wow.
And that I think is ripe for sort of growth in India.
And this is what area?
This is AI. For example, we built our own technology to sort of do that, and now we're using this technology to build apps to learn English, maths for school students, college students, etc. We started with residential software engineering programs, but that's probably now 20% or 15% of what we do. Right now we have a team of 300 people across 7 or 8 large initiatives, some of which I described.
But when you say the cost has come down from $5 to 5 cents, what is the cost of using that app for translating?
For doing voice-to-voice real-time conversations.
Okay.
See, the problem is in India especially, and not just India, right? I mean, younger population and especially the older population, they don't want to text. Text is not a natural way of communication. We learn to text because computers came in like that.
Yeah.
Voice is a more natural form of conversation, and also people who have comprehension difficulties, voice is the only proper way for them to interact with them.
Have what difficulties?
Comprehension difficulties.
Comprehension.
Yeah. So for them, text is the only legible way to do so because they get confused when they're typing, etc.
Voice is the only way.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So that's why we built this technology, because when we were building apps, we realized that text is not how people will learn. They will need to talk to a system. I'll give you another example. So, and especially I think that looks at how AI in education, especially, I think most of the world has a very limited and narrow view of AI in education. They believe that they'll have a general purpose tool like ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, and people will use this tool to learn, and that is not how learning happens. You don't expect an 8-year-old to sit in a computer and keep talking to a textual ChatGPT and learn physics and maths and science and English and piano and everything, right? So everything that you learn, the way you learn is different. The way you learn music is different from the way you learn maths, which is different from the way you learn English. So what we're doing is, one, we're building different apps for learning different things.
Okay.
And also those apps differ when the person who's learning changes. For example, for a person who is a much younger person, they learn very differently from a person who is, let's say, 20 years old. Secondly, what we are doing, as I mentioned, is that we're building this voice-based interface first, rather than them having to text. So, and thirdly, what we are realizing is that learning, as it becomes more and more isolated, where a person keeps talking to a computer to learn, it is going to lead to serious limitations in their social and life skills. So for instance, one of the app that we're building for English, it does one of the very simple things. When people are learning English together, it becomes one of the co-participant. Because what happens in an environment, let's say if there are 4 students in 6th grade learning English, the challenge is they have to learn new words, but let's say in that group, nobody knows as many new words to introduce to the group. So by conversations, a lot of new words may not be brought in. So what this AI participant does, and you just keep that phone, it listens to 5 of you, and then as a participant in between keeps bringing in some new elements or helps you sort of see how you spoke something very well, or fix something. So we are trying to look at AI, especially introduction of AI, in a way which is not this narrow view of you go to one laptop, one person uses that and learns something. It is more of an integrated view where the solution changes with regards to how we are delivering that solution, who the person who's learning using that solution, and what they're learning actually.
And when you're talking about all this and you're saying we, is this the leadership team of NavGurukul, or is this your students that are creating this?
Both. So as I mentioned, like 70% of our team is our own alumni, and also we do a lot of hackathons with our students, so they're also part of solutioning. And 30% of our team is from outside.
But it sounds like what you're saying is the model is not just educating marginalized or underserved people, it's also a lab and it's R&D, it's creating new products.
Absolutely, but that is also extremely focused on marginalized people for now.
Okay.
That remains our focus, because the thing is that most of the world is building solutions for people who can afford.
Okay.
We want to build solutions for people who can't. So that remains a distinction. But yes, I mean, we are investing a lot of money in this R&D, and I mean, our goal is to make sure that every month we can release at least one new application which solves one problem of learning effectively. And all of these applications have to be rooted more in pedagogy and less in technology. Technology has to enable, but pedagogy has to be the driving force.
And even though they're targeted at a marginalized audience, presumably there will be some profit that comes back.
No.
No, not at all.
We're not looking at profits.
You give it all away.
Yes. And also, we want to distribute them through government partners, and we're actually partnering with the governments.
Okay.
So government is happy to absorb some of these server costs. And in fact, in India, you see, for example, UPI, etc. A lot of these things were not developed as part of the government. They were developed outside, and government essentially has made sure that they're distributed very well. Mm-hmm. In fact, the latest example is Sehkari Taxi. Bharat Taxi, which is a competitor to Uber and Ola, which is actually built by some of the cooperatives, but backed by the government in a way. So, I mean, I think in a country like India, there's a very deep interest from the government to make sure that some of these things are considered to be essential infrastructure, which government support. For instance, even in education, even as of date, the schools cannot be for profit, even though there are ways schools make profit, which is actually not right. But the schools are meant to be non-profit organizations. So the spirit of education in the country, if you look at it, it still remains to be a non-profit purpose, even though we don't follow that as a country, unfortunately.
Interesting. Okay, and I opened by talking about the opportunity, but the opportunity is not necessarily for a market of growth, but also what's coming out. But I want to talk a little bit about the funding structure real quick, and then I want to go into some of just your basic numbers of how many schools, institutions you have, etc. But just to be very clear, the students don't pay anything, and you are fully funded by donations?
Yes.
Completely by donations.
Also, I mean, I do feel so that with especially people who are struggling, I mean, who are underprivileged, there is a market to, make money out of them. We just don't want to do that. As I mentioned, like, I personally very strongly believe education should be considered as an essential infrastructure and should be offered free of cost to pretty much everyone, not just underserved, even middle class and upper class, for instance. And Europe is one of those, most of the countries in Europe do provide a significant amount of education for free as a public infrastructure rather. So I share the same view. But at the same time, there are institutions which are making a lot of money out of these underserved areas, and a lot of them edge on playing with FOMO, making them take loans, etc. And a lot of these practices are predatory. Because the problem is, a lot of education cannot give you immediate financial benefits. So when you make someone spend, let's say, 80,000 rupees in a rural area on an education, which is happening from urban area, you're leeching money away from our rural economy, putting it in the urban economy. Whereas every effort that NavGurukul takes, we want to make sure that the money actually flows in the other direction. Instead of taking money from the rural areas and putting it in urban areas, we want to have a direction where money from urban areas goes into the rural areas. So when we train people to be into business or finance and software engineers, and they stay in that village and they work from there and they still earn 20 lakhs a year or 15 lakhs rupees a year, that's the kind of money flow that we like to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Interesting. You have 9 alternative universities. You did give me some insights into what's coming up down the road in terms of subjects that you're going into and different offerings that you have. But what about more schools, more universities?
So we're not planning to build any more residential campuses right now. We don't call them universities because they're not legally so. But these. So campuses,
what do you call? What is the word? I've been saying alternative university.
Yeah, I mean, I think alternative universities is fine to say. We just typically use our residential campuses.
Or
okay. You can use learning centers or whatever.
Learning centers, okay.
But yeah, I mean, so we're not planning to open any residential center. I mean, probably we'll do one more in next year, especially focus on the School of Second Chances, where we work with the vulnerable women, as I mentioned.
And where will that be?
Most likely Pune. We are in touch with the donor regarding that. But I think mostly because of AI, there's a lot of change in terms of how people are going to learn, etc. So a lot of our effort right now is to sort of absorb this change and respond to it proactively before we start opening up this infrastructure. one of the things that we have also realized is that we want to build our own infrastructure, build our own institution. So far, we have been leasing out buildings, or we have been collaborating for that. So we just bought some land in Igatpuri, and we are hoping to sort of buy some land near Pune and Bangalore to build our campuses from scratch. And that also feeds into the civil design course that we mentioned, because we want this to be led by our students, the entire process of actually building the place also. So I mean, in terms of residential campuses, not much to happen. I mean, not a lot is supposed to happen immediately or so soon. But we are planning to sort of expand a lot towards essentially the right integration of AI in education. And the reason why we are so focused on that is because the wrong kind of integration has risk which far outweigh the benefits. I mean, as I mentioned, like there are possibilities that, you know, wrong kind of education that enters into, which lacks the context, which lacks the, you know, the last thing we want people in villages to be learning is basically some system designed by US, and them learning how, you know, for example, you know, one of the when we started teaching computer science to our students, the first we asked them to do some
courses. When you started teaching what?
Computer science to our students. One of the first courses that we found online, which we just said, you know, can you try this out and we'll see. It asked them to make a tip calculator. Tipping as a culture is not such, it's not common in villages. I mean, it's pretty much absent in villages. It's a city thing, urban thing. And they're expected to understand computer science by building a tip calculator. It does not make any sense. You will not see in any computer science curriculum, and we have seen so many curriculum that tries to make a period clock, for instance. A period clock, for instance, you know, menstrual cycle tracker, for instance. And that's, for example, you know, the kind of context we're missing. I mean, you have an entire computer science curriculum where they'll make you do all random problem statements, including monkeys, including, you know, tip calculators. But it will not have any solution, any problem which are contextual to our villages.
Right.
So that's why, I mean, we especially are very, very intent on making sure that we build the right kind of AI interfaces. The last thing is that, you know, we scale something which actually does not work. I mean, especially there's a lot of urgency from the government to scale AI education in India. And there's a right sort of, I think, intent behind it. But the risk is education, unlike, let's say, building, you know, an Uber kind of app, or let's say an UPI kind of infrastructure, is not one shot all solution, one fix all solution. You need much more. You need an approach which has a lot more diversity built into the solutioning itself. Otherwise, you end up risking people learning things in a wrong way. So, I mean, so that's where a lot of our focus is going to be in the coming years.
Interesting. And you are hoping that many of these students, that 70% rate stays, and that you're growing with your own alum?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I think with time, I mean, one of our hopes is that our CEO is also one of our alums, right? I mean, most of our leadership positions should be occupied by alums eventually. There's obviously a risk of, we have to manage also the exposure part of it. I mean, we want people who are also exposed to the world and how different problems are solved. So we also actively encourage people who are working with us, our alumni, to sort of go outside and come back later. Otherwise, they risk being in an organization only, I mean, starting and ending with that organization. So yeah.
That's true. Okay.
But I mean, I think somewhere I feel that I find our alumni a lot smarter than I think I ever was at their age. I mean, the kind of context that they have, the kind of, you know, the grounding that they have, I never had it. I think a lot of our alumni, for example, our people and culture team is led by Ashwini, who is, I think, a 22-year-old alum from our side. At 22, I was just thinking, you know, what am I supposed to do? And, you know, by the time she's 34 or 35, which I am right now, I think she'll be far, far ahead than I am right now. I mean, so.
And what do you think that's down to?
Sorry?
Why do you think that is?
I think, especially with women in India, they have been through so much, especially in the rural areas. The kind of resilience that they have is insane. I mean, I don't think I can have it. I mean, and I think Vipassana for me has been a big boon to sort of work on that. But I mean, some small thing will happen. I'm like, oh, how do I deal with that, etc. And with these students, I remember one story very distinctly. So I was taking a session with the students, and I went to that session with the mindset that I'll talk about courage. And I had there was a girl from Unnao, a district in UP, a minor girl, and she was raped by an MLA in that district. And she filed a case against an MLA. And her dad was actually beaten, false case was booked against her dad, and he was brought to the police. And the MLA's people, they actually killed him in the custody. So her dad died. And then in one of the accidents, while the case proceedings were going on, her elder brother was basically in a car, and that car was also sort of, a false accident. Through a false accident, the brother also died. Imagine your father died, your elder brother died, all your male figures in your family has gone. Now you, your mother and your sister, only 3 of you fighting the case. The village has banished you. And despite all the odds, and it felt like, nothing will come out of it. She actually got this person convicted, and this person is in jail right now. And even, yes, day before yesterday there was news around him because he's trying to get bail and he's not getting, and all of that. Imagine the odds that she fought and the kind of courage she exhibited at the age of 16 or 17. Imagine, like, how her elder sister and how her mother, what they had to support by losing the family. And I went with that story, and I thought, I'll talk about courage. How, for me, it was a very defining moment of courage. Nothing I will ever do in my life will match even 1/100th of what this girl could at that age, right? And I went to this session and I started talking to him, what is courage for you? Share something, whatever. And people started sharing. And by the time they were sharing their stories, I felt like, I didn't need to share that. They've already lived a part of it. For example, there was this girl who was in a village, and one of her neighbors, she used to be tortured continuously for dowry, and she was actually burnt alive because of that. And this girl tried to sort of make a fuss about it, and everyone made her shut up because they didn't want to be engaged in someone else's business. She kept writing onto the DM and letters and everything, and finally a case was launched. I don't think anything happened for that case. Yet doing that for someone else, a neighbor of yours, and actually trying to do it through. So when she says that, you don't need to then tell her, hey, this is what I mean by courage. Yeah. They've already lived that. So, and that's what I meant. I mean, the kind of resilience that these girls have through. I mean, one of our alums, she comes from an orphanage and HIV positive, and when she got a job, basically she got a job which was very well paying and at a very nice city, and she didn't do that, and she chose to work with us at 1/3 of that salary, despite it her being the first job. And imagine you've been an orphan, you've sort of lived a life like that, and you choose that at that age. I chose that. I had money, I had a family sort of backing and all of that. I didn't make any sacrifice. She did, and now she leads a big team of us. I obviously can't share a lot of details about it, but I mean, she leads a team of about 10 to 15 people in our organization right now, and she still stays with us. And every time I remember, I mean, I've done nothing. I mean, she has done far more than I will ever be able to do. So that's what I mean. I mean, the kind of resilience that they have, and she's barely, I think, 23 or 24 at this age. Wow. And I mean, at that age, I was literally, just fooling around in my life. I mean,
well, you were obviously doing something right.
I mean,
you were fluctuating and thinking about how to make the world a better place. And I mean,
maybe. I mean, but the thing is, I think the kind of, I mentioned, the kind of clarity, the kind of resilience that these guys have, these folks have, I didn't have it. I mean, I don't mean I'm a bad person, or I wanted to do something bad. It's just that what I see is far. I mean, for example, when people ask what is your inspiration, like, Mahatma Gandhi and other things and all of that. But for me, a lot of our students are actually a lot deeper inspiration, because I've seen them living something that I couldn't imagine actually. I couldn't imagine someone going through that.
But what I think, Abhishek, is so special about what you're doing is you're seeing that these young people, mostly women, have so much courage, have so much resilience, and you're just giving them a little bit of the tools and a guiding hand to point them in the right direction so they can fly. And I think that's admirable. But also not just fly, but give back as well and help build this Gurukul, this NavGurukul of learning and giving back. And I think it's admirable and interesting. And next time I'll talk with some of these students as well, and get their stories as well. But Abhishek, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really, really pleased that you could find the time, because you're not usually in Delhi, but you come from Delhi, and I think your story is part of the entire story. So I want to know what an IIT graduate in computer technology is doing in education.
So when I was in my college, I come from a lower middle class family, and we always heard that the only way you'll be able to do anything is if you pursue good education. So going to IIT was in default. I had to study, I had to be there to make something out of it. But when I went there, I realized that in my third year I had a startup which we exited just after my college. So I had like a bunch of money after my college, and I didn't know what to do with that. So I just went around with people and like asked them, what do you do with money? And they're like, okay, we buy this, we do that. And I
so you bought a Mercedes?
No, I basically realized none of that interests me. I just thought that I'll save whatever money I had in a bank account, and I'll figure out a way to sort of live a life which gives me happiness, and I'll see how money shapes that, but not live a life focus on money basically. I was, because our startup was acquired by another startup, so I had spent another 1 year or 2 years over there. And then one of the first things that I realized was I wanted to take a break and understand more about myself, more about the world. So I started traveling, but more of a impact-oriented traveling. So I'll travel to places, I'll volunteer. I started working with Delhi government on education. Working on education was also a default because, as I mentioned, like I always felt education had a very large impact on what we do. So I felt that's probably the best way for me to sort of create impact. And I started working over there, and I realized that the students in the schools, they were fairly well supported in their schooling time, especially in places like Delhi. But after school, they didn't know what to do. Either they were aspiring to be sort of into positions where they don't have any access to. For instance, if you look at IIT, it is one of the most tough examinations in the world, probably the most tough examinations with an extremely low selection rate, and most of the schools from government schools do not make it there. And if you go beyond, let's say, top 50 or 100 colleges in India, the quality of education is so poor that even if you end up spending your 4 years or 3 years, you will not get a job out of it. So most of these students didn't have any clear pathways, and that encouraged me to sort of work on that problem statement.
Interesting. You chose education because there was something that tugged at your sort of your heartstrings, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot of, as I mentioned, like always growing up, coming from a very lower middle class family. My grandfather was not educated. My father was the first and the only sibling who was actually educated, became a chartered accountant. So it was very, very clear that education is our only savior. If we don't study, we'll always be, doing the same things. So I think that deep reasoning, that deep clarity that education is the only way to save ourselves, my family, extended to my impact. Like, how do I work with this world? Let me start with working on education for the most underprivileged. To some extent, it was also lack of limited understanding and knowledge, because I don't think I understood other problem areas very well. I didn't understand how healthcare related challenges or judiciary related challenges, etc., are where a lot of problem lies. In hindsight, I think it was this deep conditioning from childhood, education.
Interesting. And you teamed up with Rishabh Verma, who's your co-founder, and he's an IIT or a Harvard?
No,
he's a Harvard graduate.
No, he dropped out.
He dropped out
of school after 10th class. So it was a very interesting contrast, because when we started NavGurukul, we wanted to have this narrative that without degrees you can do so much, and it was a nice, I think, sort of complementary thing, because if I tell people, hey, degrees are not important, it sounds almost hypocritical that you got this degree and now you're saying, hey, you can do without degrees. But Rishabh was actually a very interesting person, because he dropped out of his school and yet did very well in his life.
I just appreciate you sharing all of this. I think it's going to be super interesting for people interested in pedagogy, for people interested in education, industry, to see these new approaches and new ways of doing things. So thank you very much for joining us today on Village Vibe, and thank you guys for watching. Please like it, share it, send it on to other people who you think would like it, and stay tuned for more at Village Square.